back from the show on Monday at 7 p.m. and we had we had under 48 hours to get on another plane to come here. So we're still quite jet lagged and still tired. But yeah, I don't know how much you know about CRIG in a kind of what we actually get up to. But the motto that is most dear to our heart is the coolest thing to do with your data will be thought of by someone else. So we try and put as many tools and as many libraries out there to allow other people to play around with our data, because we feel that that's the best way to utilize everyone's time most effectively. This is actually a motto we ran with for quite some time before we found out who it was that actually said the quote. And it's Rufus Pollock of the Open Knowledge Network, and met him recently, and he's a really good guy. During this series of events that CRIG put on, they put what they called a repo challenge at OR08, which we were lucky enough to actually win. At the time, it was a big paper check of for $5,000. And that was great. And then a guy called David Flanders, who essentially is pushing forward the CRIG, said to us, why don't we turn this into a US tour, go around to all the conferences and try and do something a bit better than just hand you a paper check. And so we agreed. Well, foolishly or not, yeah, it was fun. And unfortunately, what we found is a lot of people expected that we just went on holiday for 18 days.
So we didn't, because we didn't really go to that nice a place, really. I mean...
Yeah. So that's where we started. We spent 7 days there, and in fact, that is where our room was, on the 26th floor, overlooking the 12 floors. Oh, 15. Oh, which one was the 26th?
That was when we started in Monte Carlo.
We started in Monte Carlo, which is over there somewhere. But we actually did do a lot of work. We went to 3 conferences in 7 days, one of which was the Ocelot. Well, as you can see, we were working. We were actually undercover for the vast majority. But the first one we went to was the Ocelot conference, which was a day event, and it started on a Sunday. So we were literally working through the weekend, through the days. Ocelot is primarily a learning-focused community who are trying to do open source work in improving the software that they have. And what we found is most of them have Blackboard as their software. They were trying to fix problems that, frankly, other communities have fixed a long, long time ago. One of the first issues that came up was a woman came up and said, it'll be really good in the next version of Blackboard. Blackboard is a 13-year-old product, by the way. Well, 11. The current incarnation is 11. So it's that old, and she came and said, what would be really good is if I had some way of searching the stuff inside Blackboard. Blackboard doesn't have a search. You have to know in the hierarchy where your file is to actually retrieve it. We were kind of taken aback that it was that level of support in Blackboard. And the questions along that kind of line were just continuous. I mean, there was one where people said, I had put so much stuff into Blackboard and I can't back it up now, it won't back up. To which our answer was, well, don't use Blackboard then. But it seemed that it was a good underlining for why we were out here going to all these different communities, trying to find out what the overlay was and trying to help them with whatever we can do, because the CRIG is Common Resource Interoperability Group, trying to get people working with other people and other systems. I think we did quite well. We got a lot of prototypes out of there, a lot of ideas. Like the second conference was a conference called WorldComp, and that was a 3-day conference with 1,741 different papers being delivered in 23 different streams. To just cope with this, we put it all into a search engine, which the conference didn't have. So we built a search engine during the keynote so that we could possibly cope with the amount of papers actually being delivered. And we tried to choose the ones to go to, and we met up with some really good people. And we had ideas come out of it, like the bottom left is about using MPEG compression to work out when there's activity in a film. So his application was for CCTV, which is a nice general one. But we thought, what about if you apply it to a book? Most of a book's pages, a scanned book, is all pretty similar. The amount of motion between pages is pretty minimal until there's an image or a blank page or a thumb on the side. So it'd be a really good indicator to find out if there's a problem. So a human can then intervene without having to check all the pages at once. And so we worked on a few prototypes like that.
Another one in World Comp that I stumbled across was users were having issues. They wanted to search a repository or whatever, Google, to find equations or code, which is not something we probably consider. You know, you search for a paper, but this user was specifically interested, knew what the scientific experiment was, and wanted to find, you know, equations that do certain things, what the result sets are, being able to rerun those experiments. So that's the focus of the search, rather than the paper, which they then have to scan completely through to find if it's even relevant before they do anything with it. Taking that on, they were also code. So some people were looking for code blocks that do certain things. So, you know, Google Code now, I suppose, is a code repository, but there's not much out there in terms of getting code blocks or pseudocode out of papers and then interpreting them, adding metadata to them, and making them your resource you're searching for. So that was quite an interesting prototype that we could kind of investigate.
Okay, and we also found that they were very much concerned with just putting their paper out there. They weren't even considering that their paper would exist in a year. They had no notion of archiving. So trying to sell them the idea of preservation, you know, put it in a repository, we'll preserve it, you can refer to it. They weren't interested in that. They were just interested in finding other people's works and just parsing out the text, essentially, and getting to the actual core material, the experimental data. And I think we could do a lot more in that, when you take in a PDF or a document, you have to consider that as a complex object and maybe doing some case of disaggregation. So you put in a Word document and we have to build some tools to destroy the document and break it up into images, word blocks, into data, into the charts, and have them all be accessible by URLs so that people can cite individual bits. Because that's what researchers seem to be interested in. And that was, sorry, the World Comp is just applied computing. It was a very general conference. And finally, we rounded it off by... Oh yeah, one of the main sticking points we found almost immediately in any of the conferences we went to was as soon as we used the word repository, we had to spend half an hour redefining the meaning. They would immediately not know what we meant by it, because they would either think it's a code repository. That was number one. They would think SVN, you know, version control. The alternative was as literally a printed bookstore that you put in a cellar and forget about. So I think we found that there was a big problem using the word, and we were avoiding it like the plague. We were using words like store. We were using words like archive. Digital library, yeah. So yeah, repository was actually a really bad word to use outside of our own community because no one understands what it means. Literally no one. So moving on to Blackboard World, which we came into and set up a developer lounge. It's actually the first one of our developer lounges, which is where we basically cordon off an area of the conference and put up a big sign saying, "Come here, we'll discuss your problems, we'll go for your trials and tribulations." And that was the one we had the least real work to do, because these people are using Blackboard and their problems do stem from the product they use. And actually some of the worst people to really badmouth the product were the developers of Blackboard. So that kind of gives you an idea. In fact, the lead developer said that the product, which is e-learning, all it does is hold bits and track users, really quite straightforward. It's 30 million lines of code in a mix of Perl and Java. And they're so intertwined that they can't tell how to cut one out and where the other bit begins. So they just have to keep building.
That's 2/3 of Windows Vista, if anyone wants to.
Yeah. So actually what we did there was, you can see there, the guy on the right-hand side is Tim Donahue. He's a DSpace contributor. And I was there with kind of a fedora hat on. and we were trying to see if we could install the other one's platform. He was trying to install Fedora on his Mac, which turned out to be a very bad idea because it just doesn't happen. And I was trying to install DSpace on my laptop, and yeah, that didn't happen either. I couldn't get it installed after about an hour, hour and a half. So yeah, more work on installers I think needs to be done.
Right, move on.
Yep.
So yeah, we started there, and then we made a short trip across the country to there, Washington, and we made another short trip by car, so that was about the same time as it took to do that bit by plane, and then went up to Atlantic City.
I would also like to point out that that trip, some genius named Dave Flanders thought, hey, I know, how about if we start the flight at midnight, fly until 6 a.m., rent a car, and then drive to Atlantic City. So we ended up in like we went past Salem. We were kind of sleep deprived, probably highly illegal, but we made it. We got to the Trump Marina, vaguely intact. Looking out onto the sea and various RVs parked by the beach. And we went to EduWeb, which is how best to define it? It's an advertising and marketing kind of themed conference for educational institutions, which also has a kind of a developer track.
They don't have UCAS in America, is a good way of putting it, so there's no central body that holds information on stuff. So there's lots of different companies who will then advertise to get protection. Yeah, sorry. So I thought that mic was on. So EduWeb basically, they don't have a UCAS in America. So there's lots of companies that basically do advertising to get prospective students, and they were kind of there advertising their stuff. But there was also a lot of other e-learning people there as well. So yeah. So we set up a developers lounge, which was much more comfortable than the previous places because we had actual sofas and screens. So there's a few videos online, and we actually had quite a large attendance at EduWeb. That we had the room like all day basically, and there were always people in there doing development, arguing about stuff, chatting about stuff.
I'd just like to point out the room was ours from 7:30 a.m. in the morning till 11 p.m. at night. So we were still in there at 2 a.m. We were still in there at 2 a.m. Yeah. So we were working hard, and it was enclosed, and we got really good feeling from the content management people there, because most of the web, the educational part, they were using content management systems to run their websites, and they seemed really open to be pushing out and doing stuff with us. So talking to one guy and he really liked the idea of using OAI to migrate from one site to another, to literally map out an entire CMS site and use it as a migration tool, even internally between the same systems. And so, that was only a few days ago, so I'm going to email him and get his code, because it's open source, and he seems really open to it, and that would be just I think it would be a really good step from Richard Jones about putting ORE maps in DSpace. I've done it for Fedora, we've done it for ePrints, to have a way of archiving CMS systems on the fly. That could be really useful. Because
that's one of the things they also don't have an idea of in a lot of course management systems as opposed to content management, is we found out they don't actually have an idea of archiving the previous year's material. It's always a live system. So you have to, if you don't want material to be available to your new students, you have to delete it rather than just archive it. So being able to just extract the whole year's material resource maps, put it in an archive and make it available that way was an idea that came out of that.
We also worked with a few people, and one of the things that came out was that they seemed to be quite interested in, from a learning point of view, finding out how a paper or a journal article was actually written. So we're talking with Schofield from a JISC project I fail to remember, but it's on the blog, so it's there. And we were trying to work out how to record the various versions of an article as it developed and allow researchers on why he made those choices or why she changed the title or whatever. But to communicate back to the student that an article never starts and goes straight to the final version. There is intermittent stages, in where there will be bad parts of the article, there will be errors. So that was quite useful to see that that could be a prospect. So, yeah, the next one we went to is...
We made a little trip back by car, back to the airport we come from, Washington, basically, which is the next conference.
Which is the one we actually set up, which is the repo camp. Yeah. We organised it so that the day would be a very open space day. That was the idea. And we organised it to be at the Library of Congress. And we got in a number of people, mainly the Fedora and DSpace teams that were in the US that were present. We invited, well, it was an open invitation, so we had people coming from libraries, NSDL, Library of Congress. They all came along, and we're in a good sharing mood, and we talked through quite a few things. Mostly talking about how we can get low-level storage getting going, how to get ORE in, how to get repositories talking to one another, because it was an event where we had Fedora and DSpace lead architects there, so that we can just try to get them to talk at least. So we had, Sandy Payette, Michelle Climpton, and they did the symbolic thing of doing the handshake in the Library of Congress for us, and a bit more, high five even. So they obviously enjoyed it. We also caused a bit of a problem where we were in the Library of Congress on the top floor, and yeah, you don't want to go out on the balcony on the top floor because it overlooks Capitol Hill. So we had police coming around saying, don't go out again or the snipers will shoot at you. So yeah, we closed the balcony door after that. But all in all, I think it went really well. We did a lot of talking, we did some video, but literally we just haven't had time to write up on it. So
well, the obvious thing that's come out of this that you would probably notice in the news is the official announcement on the Fedora and DSpace collaboration, and there's your picture. So that was actually at RepoCamp. So that's getting their architects talking. I think there's common road mapping, common APIs for storage architectures, because that's been an ongoing thing since basically Sun kicked it off with the Honeycomb, bringing everyone together on that sort of project. Been looking at a common storage layer, plugin layer. ePrints has already implemented one that's in testing, and DSpace and Fedora are looking at going on to that as well. So they've already taken some of the ePrints documentation and are looking into issues with it, and that will all be fed back, hopefully through the community, so all three repositories are on the same track there, which is basically being able to enabling submission of publications into any storage mediums like the cloud or something like that, and using that as your distribution preservation, if you like.
Yeah, so RepoCamp was, it's really good. We saw a lot of things. The sort of meeting before we actually did a Library of Congress event was actually held at the Brickskeller, which I want to mention because it had over 1,000 beers available for purchase right there and then. You had a beer list which was about that thick. Very impressive. Guinness Book of Records. But that was like the Fedora DSpace pre-meeting, so we had a fair bit of time there. Yeah, and then, sorry? Oh, we actually, it turns out that Brad McLean is actually a bit of a connoisseur of American breweries. So he was pointing out all the different ones we should try, and that actually worked out really well.
There was actually a rather good beer called Collaboration, Not Litigation. And the story of it is absolutely what the label says. Two different breweries released a beer by the same name at the same time. So instead of trying to own the name and forcing litigation, they got together, an official meeting, well, official in a pub, and basically started pouring the two beers together in various ways, and ended up with this absolutely fantastic, but 8% something or other, beer that's got about 4 different kicks as you drink it. It's weird, but
yes.
Anyway.
Okay, and that was mainly what we did there, but we've still
drink.
got...
Sorry.
Yes. No. But that was the final event on the roadshow. We had literally about a day when it came down to it. We had a day in New York to try and recover, which was fun. But I think,
yes. There's all the summary and websites, and there's various bits all over the place, Twitters, blogs.
Yeah. We'll leave that up for a bit. But I think the summary that I would want to give anyway is that we really need everyone to start going to all the other conferences. We need to start going to OSCON. We need to start going to O'Reilly. We need to turn up at CMS conferences. We need to get all the teams working together. I mean, one of the key ones is getting the research services on board from day one. They need to be in there, even if it's a case of you will use the system we've just built for you. Hopefully for their needs, of course. But yeah, they need to start using proper systems. And it needs to be a really cross-support? Cross-domain, I guess is the right word. Cross-domain effort to get anything like this going. But the main URL is the crigshow@blogspot.com, and that has a number of video posts, including the prototyping that we were doing.
On mirrors.
Well, there is a story to that. We did a kind of a prototype, and we had someone Twitter, Rachel Heary tweeted, those CRIG Show boys, what will they write on next? So we took that as a challenge, and we managed to write with a board marker on a mirror in the hotel. We did an actual blackboard. We hijacked a high-definition TV and plugged the laptop in, which was a tablet PC. So we hacked that together. Paper, obviously, we did a lot of that.
So there are a lot of prototypes, is basically what we're saying. Lots of video, and they're all videos, so there's not a lot of reading. They were all done as videos so that we could actually remember, and it was quick enough that, obviously, we were moving about quite a bit, so it's just you get the camera out, talk for a couple of minutes.
Yeah, and there is accessibility concerns in that we have put a summary under each video, so you don't have to watch it, it will explain it in the text. But the video obviously explains a lot more.
And there will be more blogs going up as we actually get a chance to run. And basically, I've got a stack of notes at home, which I took at all the various conferences I haven't written up yet.
Yeah, so final note is it wasn't a holiday. We did get around, we did meet a lot of people, and we did meet a lot of different domains. So is there any questions, anything you want to know about the e-learning community as a whole?
I've just got my final slide.
Oh, you've got a final slide.
I've got my final slide, which goes back to the whole, we were talking about how repositories are services, you know, for your data, basically. So what we want to do is we want to take the repository, this new CRIG logo, and we're going to bury it in the web. And I think Richard will get this diagram.
Yes. So yes, it may be dead, but we can at least put it on the web for everyone else to use. So is there any questions? Any? Oh, there may be T-shirts. I mean, you can sort of see it in the logo up there, but yeah.